Good morning, everyone. Please take your seats. Good morning, everyone. Good morning and welcome in Brussels for the third annual Social Innovation Forum. Nice to see all of you here, familiar faces and new faces. It's truly exciting, I think, to gather once again with all of you here for this important event, bringing together, of course, a very diverse and influential community that drives social innovation forward in Europe. We are joined today by colleagues from the managing authorities, implementing organizations and non-governmental organizations who all truly work in the field of social innovation, intermediate bodies, colleagues from the European Commission, of course, and many more. And wherever you come from today, on behalf of the European Competence Center for Social Innovation, welcome all of you, and thank you for being here. Because it is your presence, really, that makes this forum a strong, powerful place for collaboration, for knowledge sharing, and for inspiration. Now, this year, our forum will explore a theme, a topic that could not be more timely, and you'll see it on the screen: how to build resilient societies across the EU through social innovation, towards a stronger Europe, investing in people and empowering citizens for social change through the ESF+. This is really the motto of this year's conference, and let me elaborate a little bit on that. In a time of profound economical, social and environmental transformations, transitions, but also in times of uncertainty, you could even say in times of crisis, the forum will examine how social innovation can strengthen resilience, empower communities, and drive sustainable change. We will highlight how fostering innovation in skills development, in employment, in social inclusion contributes not only to boosting competitiveness in Europe, but also to building a stronger and more fair future for all its citizens. So what will be our activities during this forum? Well, over the next 2 days, participants from the 5 communities of practice of the ESF Plus and the ALMA network will come together for plenary sessions, like this morning, workshops, showcases, and share promising practices and inspiring solutions from across the whole European Union. And before we dive a little bit deeper into today's agenda, we are honored to have a long-standing supporter of social innovation open the forum today. It is my great pleasure to invite Andriana Sukova, Deputy Director General at the Directorate General for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion of the European Commission, to open this year's forum. Please.
Good morning, dear ladies and gentlemen. Dear Neringa, our long-standing partner in implementing the social innovation projects that we have launched a few years ago, and also the mindset, the mastermind behind organizing these annual events.
Thank you.
It's really my great pleasure to be here and be able to first open the event and launch your discussion. As just announced, it's going to be a very rich one going through the 2 days. And this will be a natural step in the implementation of social innovation community of practice activities. I want to thank the European Social Fund Agency from Lithuania for taking up the responsibility in the last years, and also ensuring very important partnership, very positive support, and also promoting social innovation over the 3 years that have passed so far. The title of today's conference is really putting our focus on the most important elements of today's life. How can we make more resilient our society, our economies, using social innovation? And and we're taking this forward from last year's topic, which was how social innovation can contribute to skills development. And the community of practice on skills will be also having their own internal discussion, but it's one aspect of skills what are the skills that social innovators need. And I'm very glad that we have such a big community, very strong one, very diverse, but very well connected and also committed to organizing and taking forward social innovation through a number of events like joint study visits, workshops, online seminars, and so on. And I believe this work will continue in the next years. So, some highlights of our work so far with every one of you. First, we keep strengthening the National Competence Centers for Social Innovation, which for me play a crucial role in connecting all relevant partners at the national and sometimes regional level, and they are the drivers of real change on the ground. Under the ESF Plus Community of Practice on Employment, Education and Skills, we also worked on the role of non-governmental organizations and the ESF Plus in training vulnerable people, and we have published a study on this topic, and there was a very interesting visit to Madrid recently. Under the ESF Plus Community of Practice on Migrant Integration, we focused on the synergies in the use of ESF Plus and the Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund when coming to tackling social and labor exploitation and improving the integration of vulnerable migrants. There is one project, Supreme 2, in Italy, which provided an excellent example of the importance to adopt integrated approaches to improve the integration of third country nationals. Under the ESF Plus Community of Practice on Social Inclusion, we focused on innovative approaches in implementing the European Child Guarantee. A briefing paper will be published soon, and the study visit in Malta recently highlighted the importance of always giving children a voice. The ESF Plus Community of Practice on Material Support has worked on innovative approaches in delivering food and vouchers, and on developing effective accompanying measures for the transition to training and employment of the most deprived people. The community has also provided recommendation papers for the future MFF and the forthcoming anti-poverty strategy on which our DG is working on now. We will continue in this way, with close collaboration, as social innovation is based on trust, inspiration and partnership. As well as knowledge sharing and mutual learning, we are also funding grants to support the scaling up of promising innovative approaches. Most recently, we launched a call for proposals to support the implementation of the Disability Employment Package, and the budget is 10 million euro. We will fund models that aim to improve the labor market outcomes of persons with disabilities. So there is still time to apply for this call for proposals because the deadline is 30th of October, and I hope you still can encourage some of your partners or your stakeholders to apply. We were talking this morning with some colleagues, and everybody started saying that we live in challenging times, and we've never lived in unchallenging times, unfortunately, but they're becoming even more challenging now because we have multiplicity of challenges that we have to deal with, and social innovation as a very innovative tool can be an instrument to tackle the challenges, starting from welcoming and integrating people who are fleeing from war in Ukraine, to ensuring that our economy stays competitive, from finding new ways of dealing with long-term unemployment to the integration of people with disabilities in the labor market. And we are doing this with you already, and believe that social innovation can help create more resilient societies across the EU. One of the messages in the title of this year's conference is also about continuing investing in people and empowering citizens that can drive the so much needed social change. And for the future, I can assure you that the European Commission has put a high attention on social innovation, and in the proposed ESF regulation for post-28 MFF, we clearly state that we wish to continue with our core support activities for member states when it comes to facilitating capacity building for social innovation, encouraging mutual learning, transnational cooperation, establishing networks, and disseminating and promoting good practices and methodologies. surely this is only the starting point of negotiations, but we believe that there is a lot of understanding, an increasing understanding of the importance and value of social innovation, and we believe that your engagement in the process with your authorities and partners that are part of the negotiations can help support the adoption of the ESF regulation for post-28 with the attention given to social innovation. And trying to harness the potential of social innovation on long-term basis, we will be working to ensure that successful transnational projects funded by EU grants are scaled up, and we want to be sure that all positive and good examples, good models can be tested in other countries, in other regions, in local communities, and also when they prove successful, they can be scaled up into national policy. A recent OECD report, which we launched last year, looked at the main level to start, scale, and sustain social innovation in the member states. And the OECD analyzed 96 ESF-funded social innovation initiatives, interviewed many practitioners, and the final report proposes the 3S framework, an approach which any policymaker can adopt to leverage social innovation. Looking back at the success factors of starting, scaling, and sustaining social innovation through the ESF+, this report points to the need for policymakers to invest in successful social innovation activities in order to transfer or scale up successful solutions, and ideally to mainstream social innovation, impactful solutions. During the forum, we will have several testimonials from social innovators from Croatia, Austria, Finland, Italy, Spain, and Germany. And they are also part of the social innovation market, which is happening tomorrow at the forum. This is a great opportunity to meet innovators from across Europe, to learn about their projects, but also I want to invite you to seize the opportunity to engage more with all people that are here, to learn from them and establish good contacts. Exchanges like this will be a source of inspiration for all of us, no doubt, and also can facilitate the opportunities of learning from each other. Finally, let me just recall that we have significant amounts of DSF Plus committed to social innovation in this current multi-annual financial framework. We have around 1.8 billion euro earmarked in regional and national ESF programs, and we already have made 85 million euro available for the 6 transnational calls that ESFA has organized and is running. During the next 2 days, we'll have time to explore together how to best make use of these funds and achieve the maximum impact. And I'm looking for the insights, for the discussions and exchanges that will happen today and tomorrow. And I believe that this meeting today and tomorrow will be another stepping stone for the development and rolling out and scaling up and mainstreaming of social innovation in European and national policies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andriana, Sukova, for your opening remarks and for setting the frame for this year's conference. Now, please, all of you, you are encouraged, of course, to share your impressions on social media, and for that, you can use the event hashtag SIF2025. Now, let's take a look at what's ahead for day one. We will soon start with our first keynote, The Future of the European Welfare State, Why Investing in People is Crucial to Stay Competitive, presented by Robin Maialeh. Robin Maialeh is chair of the board at the RILSA, which is the Research Institute for Labor and Social Affairs based in Prague, and he's also associate professor of economics at the University of Chemistry and Technology in Prague. Following this keynote, we will have a presentation by Davide Dal Maso, vice chair of the Social Stock Exchange, which is a financial market to support social enterprises based in Torino, in Italy. And after that, we will have a panel discussion on mainstreaming social benefits or social innovation to maximize benefits for people. We are counting on your input also during that panel conversation later. A coffee break will follow from 11:45 to 12:20, giving everyone a moment to come together and reflect on this morning's discussions. After the morning break, we reconvene for the presentation of Jeroo Billimoria about scaling social innovation with governments. And then it's time for our second keynote. Bairbre Nic Aongusa, Assistant Secretary General at the Department of Rural and Community Development and the Gaeltacht in Ireland, will share her perspective on the key to successful social innovation. Right before lunch, we will have a group picture in this room, so be sure to be here right before lunch if you want to be in a group picture. Lunch will be served from 1 o'clock to 2:30, after which we will move into a dynamic set of workshops in the afternoon from 2:30 to 3:30. Quick overview, maybe these workshops will cover social innovation for system-level change. This workshop, by the way, is fully booked. There are no extra spaces available. Strengthening competitiveness through effective social inclusion. Increasing adaptability in migrant integration, understanding long-term change in skills demand, building resilient material support systems, and finally, evaluation and impact assessment. The workshops are designed, of course, to be interactive and practical, so we certainly encourage you to be active and share your thoughts. A short coffee break follows from 3:30 to 4 o'clock, after which the workshops will continue for part 2, from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and finally the day concludes with dinner here in the hotel from 6 to 8 p.m., giving everyone a chance to get together in a more informal setting. A few practical things maybe also. Please check your badges to see which is your assigned workshop and the room in which it will take place. QR codes to get access to the full event agenda, and the practical information newsletter and the Wi-Fi password is also on that. Also, please keep in mind that with us today we have our fantastic event coordinators who are wearing badges with pink stripes. Whatever question you have, you can go up to them and they will be happy to help you and answer any question you may have. So, we hope that you will be actively participating today and tomorrow and share your experience throughout the next 2 days, because this is really you and your opportunity to connect, learn from each other, and contribute to shaping solutions that invest in people and help strengthening Europe's resilience. It's now my pleasure to introduce the first keynote speaker, and today's keynote will provide us with insights into the future of the European welfare state and why investing in people is crucial to stay competitive. We are honored to welcome Robin Maialeh, Chair of the Board at RILSA, the Research Center for Labor and Social Affairs in the Czech Republic, and he's also Associate Professor of Economics at the University of Chemistry and Technology in Prague. Please join me in giving him a warm welcome.
Bonjour, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here, even more so in this special role. Thanks to organizers for having me today. I'm here today to make a big picture, and I've chosen to start with welfare state, which is one of the biggest achievements of public policy. And my central question will be how the recent changes in the technology, economy, geopolitics as well, how they will affect the European model, and what's the role of social innovations in modernizing welfare state. I hope that your innovative ideas and solutions will somehow contribute to modernizing the welfare state, because it's something that I see that it's losing its breath, and I hope that we will help it to rise again. So here is today's agenda. So I'll begin with some brief theoretical excursion. Then I will move on to global context and the current state of the welfare state. I will also briefly touch social innovations, and I will end up with some closing remarks. So let's start with a bit of theory. I know it can feel a little boring. As an economics professor, it's almost my duty to be a little bit boring. But I'd like to offer a few essential points which will relate to two different perspectives on how markets function. First, markets are seen as natural, and we assume that everything natural is somehow good. But civilization process has been always about civilizing the natural, somehow managing and regulating the natural, from cultivating plants to setting laws and norms. What are the social norms? It means that even if I may be stronger, I will not steal your meal when I'm hungry, or I will not harass a lady in the elevator because I like her. So this is civilization which is managing our wild natural impulses. But markets work differently. In their pure form, they follow the law of the stronger, so that the more competitive agent get more, and the weaker get less. So that's a major driver for structural inequality, and that's the dominating principle of the law of the stronger, which is embedded in all markets. From another perspective, markets are based on exchange. So most of us exchange labor for income, then we buy goods and services. But what if someone doesn't have anything or very little to exchange? Homeless people who are freezing in front of empty houses, or flushing drinkable water in the toilets during a coffee break instead of consuming in Central Africa. These are not market failures. This is effective market allocation. And if we want different outcomes, then we need something beyond markets. And why I'm saying all that? Markets do not exist to meet our needs. And that's why we created welfare state. There is Sozialstaat, to somehow civilize market power, to provide foundation for social dignity, for individual recognition through some central, through certain material standards. And that's why I perceive welfare state as a stepping stone for social innovations. Before we get to the welfare state and social innovations, I'd like to mention a little bit the global context. From the global perspective, we wrote a book with my colleagues from across Europe, and in order to reflect on recent crises, particularly inflation, migration, and energy security. There was hardly more illustrative case than the Czech Republic, nearly 20% persistent inflation, the highest number of Ukrainian refugees per capita, and dramatic surge in energy prices. And we mapped and assessed a range of policies implemented across Europe. Unfortunately, no country performed worse than the Czech Republic. But when I sat down to write conclusions and policy recommendations, there were actually no surprises. So basically, all serious economists and policy experts knew from the beginning what direction the policy should take. And when I was asked to give a keynote, I asked myself, what do you want to innovate? We already know how to tackle all these big challenges. And we just need to somehow put them into practice. That was my basic idea. But yeah, this is the first challenge that I have for you as social innovators, because the first challenge is how to get what already works, what is already proved, which is ready-made and tailored for our crisis, how to put them into practice, how to deliver this to those who are in power. And especially in the light of recent discussions, I wanted also to touch on the comparison of global powers. From time to time, we have a visit, usually from across the Atlantic. And the visit come to tell us how the economy should be run, what the true principles of democracy we should have. The implicit message is that Europe is right before its collapse. And let's be honest, because we are in serious troubles. I hope it is not dishonest to the organizers, but I would have terrible comments on how European Union works from my perspective. And one of the results is that United States, China, they are apparently ahead in key technologies. May it be vertical integration of AI in the industry, future of mobility, semiconductors, whatever. Europe has the oldest population of the three, with major social and economic implications, though China may follow a similar or even worse age population trajectory. We lack strategic natural resources so that we pay higher prices for the energy. European economy, if we can speak of it as a single unit, which is difficult, we grow more slowly than either of the three. And geopolitical role from economist perspectives measured as a share on global GDP is going down. So these were the flaws, but what's the goal? To have more big tech or to have more rapid growth, even if fueled by debt, like in the US. And if we stick to the example of the United States, for who is the beneficiary? Certainly not the average American, because most of the gains go straight to the top. So we must focus on what truly matters. And in this sense, Europe leads almost in every measure of individual well-being. May it be health, longevity, as a life expectancy, access to public services, social mobility, so that the American dream, you are more likely to live American dream in Europe than in the US. But let's stay honest, because without fiscal union, without or with fragmented foreign policy, all of these are in threat, so that our economy, as a European economy, will remain fragile, and our geopolitical role will be on the decline. So, based on what's been said, much of Europe's comparative advantage on the global stage stems from its welfare state. We have different welfare regimes across Europe. Let's understand welfare state simply as a set of public policies designed to promote social and economic well-being. And let's have a closer look besides what has been already mentioned, reduction of inequality, poverty, access to public services. Welfare state has also its macroeconomic dimension. So it dampens business cycle, the amplitude of the business cycle, so that crises are not that deep because of more stable aggregate demand. Expansions are not that excessive thanks to progressive tax systems. So that's basically the ABC of Keynesian macroeconomics. But the thing is that 1950s, 60s, and 70s welfare state is no longer viable. Europe's population is aging rapidly. The old age dependency ratio is projected to rise to over 50% by 2050, if I'm not mistaken. And this, of course, puts significant pressure on pension systems, healthcare systems, and so on, while having a smaller tax base compared to 1970s. And this is related to the second point, because labor market has transformed as well, because we have expansion of non-standard work, gig economy, self-employment on the rise. So these workers have lower bargaining power, facing precarization, and we still rely on traditional social insurance systems, which were built in different conditions, in different population structure, in different labor market structure. It was designed for stable full-time jobs, not for this type of labor market we have now. Another point is migration. Here, I'll make a small conservative turn inspired by Milton Friedman, because I agree with him in three things. One of them is that combining open borders and universal welfare state is difficult and challenging. He said it's impossible. I call it it's challenging. So that we desperately need some new and innovative solutions to solve this tension. Still, I believe migration is not the problem, because it will solve many problems in Europe. I think the challenge is integration, but in the first stage, our task is to not allowing some xenophobes to hijack this narrative, because when you calculate return on investment, it's always more profitable to invest in social cohesion than in fear. As for fiscal constraints, I simply reject the notion that we don't have resources, at least not as long as tax havens, tax evasion, and all these optimizations remain unsolved. Our tax systems protect the wealthiest, and then we spend immense energy to explain the poor and the middle class that they have to pay such a high prices for basic public goods. This is not sustainable either. And one example for all. Here's one of the findings of our research with my colleague Filip Červenka, and we asked a representative sample of Czech citizens two simple questions. How is the total wealth distributed according across the population quantiles, and what do you think the ideal distribution should be? So what do we see is that people dramatically underestimate wealth inequality in the Czech Republic. The top 20% own about 80% of total wealth. People think that they own around 1/2 of total wealth, and they believe that the ideal distribution would be that top 20% should own somewhere around 1/3 of total wealth. From the other end, people think that the poorest have more than they really have, and they would assign them even more than was their initial overestimation. And to be more grounded, we decompose the whole sample so that we can see the differences between old, young, rich, poor, men, women, right-wingers, left-wingers. And you know what? The results were consistent across all the subgroups. So there were no differences. Of course, we also tried to compare our results with similar research conducted in other countries. And you can see this is how much is the actual level of what belongs to the top 20%, what is the estimate, and what is the ideal share. And you see that the ideal share across various countries and cultures is pretty similar. There are basically no differences. And we know from other researches, which also decompose their total sample, that there are no differences between people across different subgroups either. So that I don't think that social innovations will somehow materialize this ideal distribution. By the way, could you imagine how the tax system would look like to lead to this ideal distribution? How radical it would have to be? So I think that social innovations could help. But why I'm saying this is that if we get into most fundamental questions of political economy, which are these distributional questions, it really doesn't matter if you are older guy, Republican in Alabama, or if you are a young cosmopolitan lady in Berlin, because your distributional preferences will likely be very similar. So I think that social innovations could look at this issue also from this perspective. So not only as a technical fix, but as a response to what people across societies feel as fair. And yes, you might argue that the fiscal effect may not be that huge, and you'll be probably right. But the first motivation is justice, and I'm saying this as an economist, which illustrates how deep and multidimensional the problem is. So you'll be discussing in upcoming 2 days very much about social innovations. I didn't want to intervene to this field that much, but I just wanted to point out at some limits and risks which are related to social innovations. And the first of them I see is depoliticization of the problems, especially the structural ones, because social innovations contribute to more inclusive policies, but they will not address the root cause of the problem. To be honest, this is not their ambition, but they really might politicize these problems, so that we need just not forget that systemic solutions require also political framework. Public provision, I think this could be a threat, that public provision could be more fragmented as a result of replacing universal rights of public provision. I think this could also deepen inequalities in cases when some essential infrastructure becomes dependent on random innovative projects or local initiatives, experimental projects. So I would underline that all of these should be guaranteed as a universal right. Marketizing social sphere. We've seen what happened to CSR agenda. In many cases, this is nothing more than just a marketing tool to polish public image with questionable social impact. So let's make sure that social innovations doesn't follow the same path. And my favorite concern, project-based schemes, especially when timed to short-term funding, they are in principle less sustainable. Another issue is scalability. I know that social innovators widely discuss this issue, and I'm for helping even one person, helping a handful of individuals. This is noble, but this is not a strategic approach to policy. So if we just lose our direction and without any more sophisticated noble goals, let's just follow what's been said by Jeremy Bentham: the greatest good for the greatest number. That could be the objective function to be maximized. So finally, wrap up. Europe should lead differently. I think that Europe should utilize its comparative advantage, not copying what other global powers do. If they are better in car production, okay, why not? Let them be. We can focus on public transportation. Second, what do we want? I wanted to dig deeper in this, also deeper in the history, back to Enlightenment, because it was mentioned in the promoting quote that was shared in social media. But just very briefly, what Enlightenment, and that's our European advantage. It didn't teach us only to understand and master the world, but also why we want to do that. So that all the technologies, markets, growth, and so on, these are very powerful tools, but they are just that. They're just tools. And we must make sure that they serve people to live better lives. And that's the ultimate measure of progress. And that's the ultimate measure when we compare with others as well. And it should be also the right measure when we think about social innovations. Okay, then social innovations. Yeah, but there is also bureaucracy and regulation. I can't resist to skip this one, as we are in Brussels. But maybe from a different angle, because no one likes them, of course. They are often criticized, but on the other hand, they somehow civilize society and manage the harmful externalities. So that, yes, we have gun regulation higher than elsewhere. We have higher social protection. We have higher workers' protection, consumer protection. We protect better personal data. Yes, it is then more expensive, but let's discuss if we want to pay the price for that or not. it's not wrong by default. So that sometimes we should be also proud of our bureaucracy and regulation. Finally, social innovations, I would urge to channel them to tackle the most pressing structural problems. They should not replace but complement welfare policies on the national or even EU level. And they are particularly important in cases when all the big blanket one-size-fits-all solutions don't work. So let's fill those gaps with social innovations. For those who found my talk a bit unstructured or confusing, I'm sorry, it's always like that, but I learned my lesson, so I provide very simple takeaway. Yeah, it states the obvious, but in my humble opinion, if we follow just these three, it would cause a revolution in human development. These are still not fulfilled. And for those who enjoy European intellectual tradition, I try to offer something more thoughtful. This is what I believe Bairbre Nic and Theodor Adorno would say at the end of this keynote if they were one person. Even though they had many disputes on many different topics, so this is just my humble take. It may sound simple, even self-evident, but it is deeply problematic. Even if we start with the easiest part, with no one left behind. Could you answer who's the no one? This is a very difficult question, and the question is full of struggle. So any idea? One last example that just came to my mind. When Thomas Jefferson declared all men are created equal in the Declaration of Independence, 1776. Of course, he didn't mean women or black people. Yeah, and these are the no ones today. So I would motivate you to not forget also those who are silently excluded today. And I'm running out of time, so that's it. I thank you very much for your attention. I wish you inspiring 2 days, and I very much look forward to our conversations ahead. So, merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Robin, for sharing insights and reflections coming straight from your research, and I'm sure that your perspectives on the future of the European welfare state and the importance of investing in people will resonate throughout the forum and will provide a solid basis for the discussions we will have during the next 2 days. Thank you very much. Now, please join me in welcoming to the stage Davide del Maso. He's the vice chair of the Social Stock Exchange, a financial market to support social enterprises. And Davide will present his project to all of us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, let me clarify that the Social Stock Exchange doesn't exist yet. So it's still a project, even if we are confident to launch it next year. So the first point that I would like to touch is why a social stock exchange. And the reason is, in fact, in the words that we have just heard from Professor Maialeh. So Europe is facing major social challenges. And of course, we all know that the public policy will be the backbone of the solution, that to a limited extent, we can rely on the contribution of the private sector. But the private sector is made of, say, the capitalistic economy and the social economy. And the failure of ESG wave, if me allow me to simplify, clearly shows that capitalism is not able to provide the solution, being part of the problem. As someone said, you cannot solve the problem using the same mindset that have generated this problem. So I think that we have to build a stronger social economy in Europe, a social economy which is made of enterprises and other social actors who put impact before profit, or at least as important as profit. As of today, the European social economy is certainly strong, but not strong enough. It needs to grow. It needs to grow not marginally, but it needs a jump in terms of size and in terms of scale. And in order to do so, you need investment, huge investments, that cannot be provided by the existing social financial infrastructure, and namely the banking system. So you need long-term capital, you need risk capital, and you need the channels you need the financial infrastructure to channel these resources towards social enterprises and social economy actors. So the idea behind this project is that we have to build up a coherent and consistent framework of financial infrastructure that from banking to private capital, to venture capital, to private equity, to crowdfunding, and eventually to a social stock exchange that is at the top of the pyramid. So that's what we are doing. We are creating a dedicated market for social enterprises. And I want to draw your attention on dedicated. I could use the word reserved or designed for, because one may argue, why shouldn't a social business go public and list to a, say, normal stock exchange? And there are at least two reasons why this is not auspicable. The first is that normal financial markets, so traditional financial market, typically measures the performance of issuers along with financial or economic, just purely economic parameters. And in that respect, of course, social business will always come out as losers, because that's not the reason why they exist. They exist to provide social value, not economic value. So you cannot compare apples and bananas. So if you want to have a market for a financial market for social enterprises, it must be separated from the traditional ones. And the second reason is that you cannot ask an investor to argue whether or not, or to what extent, a given issuer is an impact company, an impact enterprises or not. So by creating a segregated market where listing rules are designed in a way to select only impact-oriented companies, you facilitate the life of investors, because they can rely on someone else's due diligence and know that if they invest in that market, they will find only impact responsibly enterprises. The other point that I want to stress on this slide is that we are not selecting issuers along with subjective criteria, but according to what they do. So regardless the legal nature, they can be cooperative, they can be limited companies, and so on and so forth. What we look at is whether they provide and they deliver a clear, intentional, measurable, and additional social value. I won't spend time on who we are. The only thing that I want to say is that the social stock exchange is not designed by a single promoter, but from a coalition of a multi-stakeholder platform of different actors based in Italy, along with private banks, public governments, public agencies, researchers, consultants, and so on and so forth. So we partner with Vorvel, who is a financial market manager. It's technically speaking, is a multilateral trading facility. So it does exactly the same job of a traditional stock exchange, but under a different regime. But I want to stress that because the technological and legal infrastructure is already existing. So we are adding a new market to an existing one, but we don't have to create it from scratch. So this is the timeline. We have already defined the listing rules. We have already done most of the job in terms of technical aspects, and we are ready. We are very close to the launch that hopefully will be next year. Let me just spend a few minutes on explaining how it works in practice. We are well aware that it's not sufficient to create an infrastructure to make it work. You need to attract both the demand and the supply actors to the market. So we are figuring out a system where there is a promotion agency, a market promoter, that will continue to address the problem and to facilitate the participation to the market from the supply and the demand actors, so investors and issuers, to create the ecosystem which is needed. Think of lawyers, social professional service providers, and so on, and to accompany the process to the IPO and to the listing process. So the promoter will be side by side with the market manager in setting the listing rules and updating them, accreditation of all the service providers, and to provide an independent verification of the accountability process. Because of course, what we ask issuer is to be very transparent on the way in which social impact is designed, governed, managed, measured, and communicated. In practical terms, the social stock exchange works like a normal stock exchange, so with demand and supply and issuers and intermediaries and so on and so forth. There are a number of technical aspects that I don't have the time to describe, but of course we are working on metrics, so how the social impact will be measured, which is the relationship between social value and economic value, how the price of the stocks incorporate the social value, how we can prevent the risk of volatility in markets where the capitalization of issuer is relatively small. But let me just point out one aspect which I think is very crucial in the functioning of this initiative, which is the liquidity provider. We know by experience that financial markets where small caps are listed run a risk of illiquidity. So we are building up a liquidity pool which will be fed by anchor investors, foundations and public entities, which will intervene when especially small investors will be unable to sell the stocks and risk to remain blocked in the investment. So there is no need to say that this market has been designed in Italy, but it's easily replicable and scalable, so it can be repeated elsewhere, or ideally also at European level. My final remark is about the potential of this initiative in terms of social innovation and transformation. Because one may argue that a social stock exchange, it's too complicated, it's too sophisticated, it's very costly, it's only for fews, which is partly true. I can, of course, elaborate on that, but I don't have time to. But there is one thing at least, which I think that is undeniable. And that is a social stock exchange, how we are designing, have a unique features that makes this challenge worth to be addressed, and which is that it's a market open to the participation of retail investors, of households. If you think of it, people like you and me cannot directly invest in any impact company. And venture capital funds are reserved to professional investors or to institutional investors. But typically households like you and me cannot contribute directly, financially speaking, to the growth of social economy. So this is, in fact, the only way through which households can contribute to a real transformative project to create a social economy. We, as European citizens, can vote during general election, can vote with a wallet when we go to the supermarket and we choose whether or not to buy a sustainable product or services. Tomorrow we will be able to vote also through our investment. So to contribute and to leverage the use of money to change the way in which we create value. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Davide, for your presentation on this inspiring project. During the next hour, we will have a panel discussion about mainstreaming, because, as you all know, while many promising initiatives exist, it is really a challenge to make them a policy standard and thus having a lasting, enduring impact on their wider community. And this panel will explore how to move from local pilots to real systemic change. And I would like to welcome to the stage for this panel discussion Ruud Passerman, of course, Director at the Directorate General for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion of the European Commission. Please take a seat. Patricia Bethenartea is Director General of the Family, Diversity and Social Services at the Spanish Ministry of Social Rights. Welcome. Felipe Almeida is President of Portugal Social Innovation. Sasha Peel is here as well. He's Policy Officer and Funding Program Manager at the Federal Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs in Germany. And finally, Kuba Vignansky is President of the Management Board at the Shipyard Foundation, an organization that creates and supports effective solutions for social challenges in Poland. Welcome to all of you. I'll take this seat so I can see all of you. So what we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, is talk about two questions, and after that we'd like to give you the floor for more questions. And a first question will be, how could social innovation move from local pilots to systemic change? And we would like to ask you to share with us one or two examples of practices or mechanisms that can overcome the current barriers to mainstreaming social innovations or solutions for wider communities. We will talk about this during 15 to 20 minutes. The second question will be, how can we foster deeper exchanges between the member states on mainstreaming social innovation, for another 15 to 20 minutes. And after that, we would like to give you the floor for questions. At a certain point during the second question or so, you will see a Slido sign appear on the screen. That is your opportunity to send us some questions, but we will also take questions from the room orally. We will have microphones in the room as well. We'll see how it goes. But first of all, for the first question, Ruud, if I can start with you, how can social innovation move from local pilots to systemic change? What are your thoughts on this question, please?
Thank you. Welcome to everybody, to Brussels. You start with me because I'm the least competent person on this panel.
Is that so?
Because this is really...
Who was willing to start?
Because really, the European level is the furthest away from the actual working? Yeah, okay. So the European level is the furthest away of the actual mainstreaming, let's say, but it is the place where there is a lot of exchanges.
No, this is, so all of you would have a microphone, sorry. Yeah.
Okay. So what I
Sorry,
was saying,
sorry.
no, it's fine. So what I was saying is that there is this, the European level is the level, though, where there is a lot of exchanges, and also, if you want, things perhaps start as projects, but then they are developed and they're brought up as sort of policy initiatives that the Commission proposes. So, for example, I mean, to start, just to show how old I am, when I arrived in the Commission, I started working on pushing member states to do active labor market policies. That was a novelty at the time, to, you know, sort of help really have active support for unemployed people to get back in the labor market. We talk about the youth guarantee, which was successfully implemented initially as a pilot and then mainstreamed since 2013 in the European Union. We talk about, for example, the fact that now everyone agrees that I mean, that the goal should be deinstitutionalization of people, and also that is an idea which has been pushed also through the European Union. So this is just to give examples that of what the Commission can do, but it is indeed the hardest part from the social innovation, which is an idea. Okay, it works somewhere, then you try and see if it works also somewhere else. It's always sort of project-based, and moving from project-based to mainstreaming, systematizing something which is part of the policy of a member state, it's really a very, very big challenge, and I mean, it's rare. It doesn't happen with all the social innovations that we have. Now, what we can do, though we do try to support as much as possible this development. Some of these ideas have been initiated at the European level. We are also now, for example, ALMA, which is about mobility projects for the most deprived young people, or the child guarantee, but we also support models which we have not initiated. For example, Housing First certainly has not initiated by the European Commission, or the Zero Long-Term Unemployment Areas, which is originally a French project. So, so on one hand, we are not the initiators for a lot of things, but we try to support what we can as much as possible, pushing from the idea to the scaling, the transferring, and eventually the moving from a policy project based to mainstreaming to policy advice that the European Union does. Now, how do you actually mainstream in member states? There are various possibilities. You need to have policy changes, but you may also want to use regulation. You need to secure financing. You need to secure administrative capacity or institutions. I mean, a clear role for somebody, yes? I don't know if you see what I mean. So, for example, policy. For example, the youth guarantee has been pushed very much by the European Union, put into recommendations at European level, etc. But also, we also had a dedicated budget at the time, the European Youth Initiative, Youth Employment Initiative, sorry. Regulation. The other point is important is regulation. Here, for example, I want to mention the French 90-10 funds, which basically obliges operators to propose to investors to invest 10% of the 10 to 15%, they've increased that now, in social economy. So they don't have to, but just the fact that they get the proposal to do it has increased enormously the amount of money that is available for social innovation. Financing is key, as I mentioned before, of course, and there, of course, I mentioned that the European Social Fund can be used to mainstream various initiatives that we have, notably with sorry, I've just seen this watch. It's 53. You want me to speak for 53
Never mind
minutes?
the watch. I'll keep an eye on the watch.
And okay, sorry. So I said that financing is very important. You can also use the ESF to mainstream social innovations. And last but not least is the institutions point. So it cannot be that social innovations remain in a service which is the social innovation service or unit or ministry or whatever, because then, I mean, it has to be mainstreamed in the administration to be actually able to do it. And as I was discussing before, during the coffee break, often the innovation is about putting services that didn't speak to each other in the same room. And then you have, I don't know, the health services and the housing people together, and they all want to keep their remit. They think it's a good idea, but what should I do, and what do I do, and what do you do, and I don't have resources. So there is this boring institutional administrative part, which is very important to actually manage to mainstream innovations.
Okay. Patricia, what is, according to you and to your experience, required for mainstreaming?
Well, hello, good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting the Spanish Ministry of Social Rights. Our experience tells us that probably the challenge at national level and also at European level is not the lack of experiences, concrete experiences, but how to ensure this innovation transforms life on a large scale. So the real difficulty lies in moving from isolated pilots to systemic change, and that's the way we are trying to work in Spain. Our experience shows that it's becoming to be possible when pilots are not isolated, but articulated and connected around shared missions and translated into structural reforms. From our perspective, achieving this requires two things. First is purpose-driven streams of innovation that foster connections and generate collective learning, and also generate permanent structures that institutionalize social innovation within the architecture of public policies. There are two examples that I'm bringing to the floor this morning. One is what we call Plataforma Vidas. Vidas platform is a social innovation platform financed through Next Generation EU funds, the Spanish Recovery Plan, conceived as a national mission to transform social services and long-term care. It works through 20 pilot projects. Instead of being treated as isolated experiences, they were organized into a portfolio of innovations structured around 8 complex social changes, which made it possible to identify transferable solutions tested with more than 35,000 people. Some concrete examples of how these pilot projects are impacting the lives of people, of concrete people. For example, new models of housing with support through a housing first and housing-led approach have enabled people experiencing homelessness to move from collective shelters to community-based homes with flexible support and personalized transfers. Transitions from institutions to community living have been carried out for people with very complex support needs who now live in chosen homes and participate actively in their communities. Also, for older people, residential facilities have been transformed into a small-scale home-like units of shared living where intimacy and sense of belonging replace institutional logics. Self-managed care communities and neighborhood support network have been launched, together with new professional roles that we have been testing and that support these life transitions and connect people with resources. Social technologies have also been developed to promote autonomy and independent living. And also for children and young people, we have piloting programs that have been implemented to support caregivers in accessing to housing and employment and have better lives, along with models to prevent violence against children through community action and active participation of children and adolescents. In addition, specialized foster care for children with complex needs have been introduced, ensuring protective and personalized family environments. The platform, this collective intelligence, generates a stream of learning, of collective and shared learning, where organizations, administrations, and communities compare findings and inspire each others. And this platform also reinforces the idea of an ecosystem that learns rather than a catalog of projects. I think we have an added value of sharing all these experiences together with the value of the projects themselves. And it does not remain at the experimental stage. We are transforming these experiences into public policies. Many of the lessons learned have already been translated into laws and into other public policy roadmaps, as national strategies, and so on. For example, these new forms of supported housing in the community have been incorporated into the National Catalogue of Services, allowing, for example, elder people or persons with disabilities to live in homes within their communities with flexible support and personalized also as an alternative to institutionalization. So the experience shows us that purpose-driven, mission-oriented innovation can directly feed into transformative public policies. And the second example I would like to bring to the table is the Spanish Consortium for the State Competence Center on Social Innovation that we are establishing at this moment. This is an interministerial consortium led by the Ministry of Social Rights, but involving other ministries in the Spanish government, Ministry of Science, Innovation and Universities, Ministry of Finance and Civil Service, together with the National Center for Technological Development and Innovation, Spanish National Research Council, and the Aguirre Lehendakari Center, and with the support of our ESF Plus National Management Authority. It works, it pretends to act as a facilitating umbrella, creating the stable context for social innovation. We think that this context, structure and stable, is a very important issue in order to do this shift between concrete projects and mainstreaming public policies. And also the consortium, the competence center, will connect practice and policies. That brings, from our point of view, from our experience, large-scale space for collective intelligence, bringing different inputs and different views on innovation coming from different parts of the public policy. It brings together diverse actors. We think this is another key message in order to have success with this initiative. And it will implement processes of listening, experimentation, and shared learning. Also, the consortium embeds social innovation as a structural component of public policies. We really think that this is a very useful tool in order to move beyond the logic of ad hoc projects. It also acknowledges that successful social innovation is the kind that endures and reshapes institutional frameworks rather than remaining as short-lived experiences. And also, this center has a strong strategic character. It's not a policy of a single actor or a single sector, but a cross-cutting commitment of the state to transform how care is organized, guarantee rights, and make more efficient use of public resources. So this center represents a transformative public policy, institutionalizing social innovation and placing it at the service of complex social challenges such as long-term care and just ecological transition, for example. So the Spanish experience shows that mainstream, which is a very important issue for us, means transferring collective learning from platforms like Vidas into laws and other strategic roadmaps and structural reforms, and the institutionalization of social innovation in permanent structures like this consortium is also another way of mainstreaming innovation into public policies. And only in this way we can move from local pilots to systemic change that benefits society as a whole.
Okay, thank you. If I can summarize, so main requirements for you in order to reach systemic change are purpose-driven innovation streams for collective learning and then permanent structures to institutionalized social innovation. Maybe if I can turn to Sasha, could you share some concrete examples maybe, or provide us with some learnings from your daily practice?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for inviting me, and also words from the Federal Ministry for Labor and Social Affairs in Germany. With the ESF Plus, we quite have a shift also to social innovation since 2007, 2013, and made the whole program, the federal program, as a social innovation experimental labor to complement regular social systems, since the ESF Plus is still big, but doesn't have the critical size to really engage big reforms that are much more in the system. What we want is filling the gaps, be complementary to the system, and bring the social service nearer to the people, especially regarding what are the promises of a social market economy. So it resonates very much what Mr. Maialeh was saying about what is the European model of welfare state. So our ESF Plus intervention, it's mostly a mainstreaming of social innovation in a way in all fields of intervention. You will find not only social innovation where it's labeled, you will find it in all areas where we want to, through the assets what we have in our model, and also what the ESF brings, some upscaling and real mainstreaming of innovative approach. The key assets are the partnerships, or also the horizontal principles that we can put into the system and help him to become more agile, more smarter, nearer to the people. And of course, labels are one. I can give you one example with the operation of strategic importance. We don't talk much about it. I'm keen to hear about your operation of strategic importance in your member states, but we have one. It's coming from the FEAT, and it's now in the ESF Plus, with the social media street work. Projects that it's also a good example for the complementarity between the regional level of the ESF in Germany, which is more place-centered, more human-centered, and also more local according to the territorial needs. It was tested, this social media street work with the ESF program of Berlin, and then take over by the Bund, by the federal level, in our program, the EH Plus, which is the successor of the FEAT, in order to reach a wider community with the newly arrived EU citizens, and also with the homeless people, in order to be complementary to the local projects and to have this social media approach in the chat groups, and to help the people to reach the social service where they could solve their problems in order to integrate into Germany and into the labor market. This is a very good example how it was made with the mother tongue counselors, and also with the aim to counteract disinformation and fake news in the internet. So we very much hope that it will be also possible to transfer it to other programs. All this filling the gap, this building bridge to the people is very central to all intervention. And what is really important, the partnership principle, the cooperation structures that we have in all programs. So migrant integration is maybe one of the biggest challenges Germany has to face since the huge influx of refugees since 2015, 1 million persons on average every year, 6.5 million people, and that's why ESF programs were there to help. Wir schaffen das from Mrs. Merkel would not be possible without the ESF. All the language course and integration course were funded by the ESF and then mainstreamed in the regular system of the Bundesagentur für Arbeit. It was a huge asset of the ESF, and nobody talks about it, but anyway, now about skills, recognition and validation of competences. The EQ network shows very much the soul of ESF intervention, which is about cooperation and to drive innovation by a decentral approach among all the different centers for that are really place-based and in direct contact with the companies. It is made with the companies where the job seekers or the refugees wants to reach. And we have several programs. My colleague is here also related to the persons with migrant background that are longer in Germany, especially men who have more difficulties on the labor market. And we tried also to have with this cooperation regional structures in decentral all over Germany to bring them nearer to the labor market. And this cooperation structures helps to look what works on the ground, and then we develop a portfolio like a platform of innovative approach and of models that can be then upscaled and transferred to others. This same applies for the help for the elderly people, which is our second social innovative program. But as I said, it's not only in the social innovation access that we will find social innovation. We had now the Ukrainian refugees in Germany since 2022, and we had to put a job turbo. And it was the ESF structure that helps to help the companies to hire and to develop all the refugees. So this is very much important to have this complementarity and to see that you will find partnerships programs in Germany that show how to tackle also the future challenges like digitalization, future of work. And you see this in all the programs we have with the social service, with the Sozialwirtschaft, or the welfare organization. They are part of the monitoring committee, and they help with us as ministry to design the programs together. So it helps the legitimation of the ESF program, and then help to disseminate, to infuse the social market economy. Since Rückenwind or Wandel der Arbeit are really made with the companies, with the Betriebsräte, with the representatives of the workers. So you see very well that the ESF is still this big instrument for adaptation to work. But it can place on different level regarding the priority, and it's why it has really needs also this long-term continuity, and for the future we need to secure some help also in the ESF regulation to maintain this structures, and also the ability to co-finance social innovation through the programs, and therefore we really look forward for the negotiation.
Okay, thank you, Sasha. So you're really convinced that ESF enables experimentation, co-financing, leading to lasting systemic impact. And thank you for sharing the examples. Felipe, what do you see as necessary to create systemic change starting from local pilots?
Thank you very much, Wim. Let me start by thanking the invitation to be in the forum and for being in this stage, sharing the stage with such experienced and very inspiring colleagues, and also congratulate the European Social Fund Agency and the European Commission for the wonderful organization of the event, but most of all for keep bringing us together in this very special moment of our lives, filled with so many uncertainties and unimaginable common challenges. And for the sake of time, because I'm seeing the pressure of that big clock over there, I'll be as pragmatic and practical as possible, trying to complement the interventions here, but I commit myself to, if I take a little bit longer than I should, I won't answer the second question, or at least I will take no more than 30 seconds. Good idea.
That's the promise? Okay.
I'll try to be practical. But to frame my answer to that exact question, I think we have to come back a little bit. Just to recall, as I believe a lot of you know, Portugal is using the European Social Fund since 2014, 11 years now, to develop a social innovation ecosystem in the country. We've designed 9 specific financing instruments using the European Social Fund, adjusted to the specific needs of social innovation. All of them, most of them, with blended finance approaches, where we match the European Social Fund with the funds that comes from social investors, as we call it, public and private organizations that decide to co-fund social innovation projects alongside with European funds. We have supported more than 1,000 entrepreneurs and projects, and we are funding those projects with more than 1,000 social investors, and now we're documenting dozens of projects that made it successfully from the pilot to public policies at the local or central level. So I will concentrate my answer in practical terms, answering that question. How can we use European structural funds, namely the European Social Fund, to help pilots of social innovation become systemic? And on that sense, I will build on what Robin told us, the importance of bringing into this conversation not just social innovation. We should be talking about public policies. Because how can a pilot become systemic? We have our experience in Portugal, we have several ways. It can grow by its own in a business-oriented approach, scale by their own. It can be an open source methodology for others to replicate the methodology in different regions. It can use social franchise approaches, or in many cases, most of them, they can only scale and reach everyone that needs that new solution through public policies. It makes no sense that we are using public funds to fund social experimentation and then public policies goes on the other side, ignoring that these are being tested. So I will concentrate on that, how we can move from pilots to systemic change through public policies using the European social funds. Practical advices based on our experience. First, design different financing solutions for different financing needs of the organization and different potentials for impact of the projects. Second, make sure that you are funding, the teams that you are funding are really experts, not on the innovation, but really experts on the problem they want to solve. It's not always the case, but make sure that the money is directed to the ones that have the more potential for impact. Then, require validation from public administration on the methodologies, on the results. Bring them into place. That's what we've been doing in Portugal. Also, require a dissemination plan. We don't ask the organizations that we are funding, what is your business model for the economic sustainability of the organization? That's not the right question. The question is, what is your scalability plan for the impact if it works on a local scale or regional scale where you are testing it? And that dissemination plan can include public policies. Also, align the operations with public policy priorities. We've been discussing public policy priorities with the public entities that are responsible for defining and implementing public policies in Portugal, and we align those objectives, and we make them public so that the entrepreneurs can direct their energies and resources for the most pressing social challenges. Also, make these instruments blended finance approaches, bringing public administration, public entities into the place of the funding the projects, co-funding the projects at the local level or a central level. Also, make it mandatory for impact management and measurement strategies from the start. Public policies cannot be based on hunches, and we know that sometimes they are. We need evidence-based public policies. And social innovation is the ideal context to provide evidence of impact and new methodologies that can really inspire the evolution of public policy. So you need impact management from the start. Also, design a sound capacity building for everyone, including public officers. Public administration need capacity building. And finally, have a team on the ground that help public officers and the entrepreneurs to design dissemination plans, scalability for the projects, and public officers to embed innovation in public policy. Why? Because they don't know how to do it? No, because usually they don't have time to do it. So you need teams that help them to use the time to make this transition. And if I have more time, then I will showcase some examples of how we've been doing that with the financing instruments in Portugal. It's not always successful. We always have our foot on the door. And this is a national public policy, Portugal Social Innovation, coordinated at the center of the government for 11 years. Even though we are at the center of the government, we are always having to struggle to work with public policy entities. But it's quite effective. Most of the entrepreneurs that we've been supporting, they are helping actually public policies. They cannot make sure that their solution can scale to the whole country by themselves. They need partnerships with others, and they need public policies. And municipalities became key partners on that process.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Felipe, for sharing these very concrete tips. Finally, Kuba, I think one of the things you wanted to highlight in this conversation is that systemic change goes beyond legislation, but I'll give you the floor. I think it works, it should work. Maybe you close the microphone.
What an innovation, sharing things. Okay. Thank you for inviting me, first of all. Second, I'm the only one who is not the member of the government and never aspired to be one. And I work for the non-profit organization. But I think it's obviously every country would kind of highlight this kind of being exceptional. Well, it's not the, it's also this case because the whole system of support of the social innovation was from the very beginning, I think, invented, conceived, structured and implemented by two sides. One is the Ministry of, right now it's called Funds and the Public Political and Regional Policy, which basically is a main kind of a convergence point from the EFS and many other. And that's one of the challenges because a lot of modernization kind of elements is very much organized around this kind of a support from the EFS. So one of the big questions for that whole ecosystem or the system is whether is there a life after a European Social Fund? And that's why we should discuss how this is organized to find a balance between what is directive, funding driven, whatever, to something which is more organic. Because I would obviously, I think you asked me because I have a reputation of being a hooligan and provocateur. The one thing is system, because I think it's a very simple thing, an adaptation of every ministry in every country, but kind of a direct, I think we are trapped in two kind of mental metaphors. One is how you go from the local to the mainstream and the systemic. So I think one of the overused also by myself graphical explanation of what is the life of social innovation in this famous Fibonacci spiral, which I think was first quoted 25 years ago by the Open Innovation book in UK, whatever. You have this kind of, from the spark to the system. It's like you're going to the moon. And that's might be the part, although that kind of inspiration, first of all, everybody who is doing it in this business understand you have a very different passengers. It's not the traditional model. And the second kind of illusion is that we're using so much the concept, which is so much kind of converted, borrowed from the market thinking. Like, you have a minimal viable product, and then you go for scale, and the bigger and bigger and bigger. So kind of a growth. It's basically measure of success. And I have a question with both. First, with this trajectory, we use it all together. But actually, if you see the social innovation pattern, it's a lot of zigzagging. It's a lot of the leapfrogging from both sides, retro innovation, solutions waiting for their problems. So it's no, I mean, it looks nice. We have it as a logo, I think, in one of our portals. But I think we have the much more subtle in terms of how the change is happening. So the first one. Actually, recently, Gorka sent a document on the acupuncture as an element of influencing public policy, as being a non-profit organization, being in a sense always weaker. This kind of a theory, because it's a lot of asymmetry. Acupuncture is, I wouldn't say a weapon, is a cure of weaker, because it means you don't have a power, you have intelligence. You understand what are those 360-something points in your organism. We don't have 3,000 years of Chinese medicine to understand, but we understand the system. Sometimes, paradoxically, you have to push here to have a reaction there. And I think what we should do collectively is to understand the system to the extent that we can use those kind of a subtle kind of a mechanism which triggers internal mechanism of something which is not. And that's how I'm coming to the concept of the system, which might be ambivalent, because for some people it's like a kind of arriving point. It's like a coda. It's we are in the system. We have a legislation, for example. I mean, being in this business for, I will tell you, systemic change is not legislation. The real systemic change is a new equilibrium of people expecting things that it should be organized that way. You have two bottles here. It was not patented, the fact that you have a two almost unbranded, bottle of waters with gas and no gas. People are basically replicating things. Very often it's a very different dynamic. If you take my favorite, I think, one of the kind of, for me, iconic social innovation many years ago, movement of anonymous alcoholics. No regulations, no big scale. Working in 140 countries based on the concept of 12 steps, and then transferring itself to the other behavioral kind of dependencies, if you like. Very often, the social innovation don't have those kind of a characteristic which is like a market or product. It's very often kind of a habit in a sense, and the convergence of that is not just like blowing a balloon. It's small and bigger, and bringing from local to the national. I think there are many other ways of basically, especially if you think like an ecosystem. One idea is basically you have to climb to the top to be a top predator, maybe a minister even. But then you have a question, a lot of the social innovation will be compared to the ecosystem in terms of what part of the ecosystem we are. Like, I'm happy to be a plankton, okay? I notice basically the fact that people habitually, they think, okay, things might be organized differently. They have this kind of a skill, this anti-fragility to say, okay, there is a problem, there is a solution. Maybe it cannot be listed as a big European projects and kind of a flagship projects, although I'm very much supporting a kind of a selection of the flagship project and pushing them in a sense. In Poland, we have those kind of a thing. So we have a big number, because if you have this ecosystem approach, the only thing you can do, if you have a kind of a modesty to say, you cannot basically rule the ecosystem by its nature. You cannot. You can say, if you believe the ecosystem is a kind of almost collective self-reflecting mechanism, especially in the environment as we live right now. Organizations or societies also in Europe is militarizing themselves. So you have this kind of a threat of, okay, forget all those social innovations. Okay, we have bigger things to do. And that's for us, I think, if you think what is the change in the system these days is a narrative. If people believe the social innovation is a part of the resistance, not part of the weakness, I think we are in a safe place, because really what brings small to the big, if you like, anecdotic to the systemic, it's not the push, it's the pull. In a sense. I think we live in a moment where we basically should not, although we were all kind of, I don't say, we're not orphans of the European social funds, but there are much bigger streams right now. And we have to not to be basically sidetracked, but to say, we are the part, we might be worth as much as 2 helicopters, That might be even more, in a sense, in terms of how people organize themselves.
So what you're saying, Kuba, is that the system in itself may be the problem or a barrier,
yes,
and that
system
we need disruption
itself might
more
be
than
a problem. If you switch to the ecosystem, then you pay a price, but it's worth to pay. Ecosystem cannot be directly controlled. The thing you can do, you can increase evolutionary process, like big numbers. More and more in Poland, as a benefit of working with our ministry, we have should I say that? We have a permission, in a sense, to assume from the very beginning, and we talk big numbers, 300-400 kind of ideas. Only 1 in 10th. After the rigid prototyping and testing, we believe belongs to the category of being, in a sense, possible to scale, if you like. So we have a 9. So the failure is, this is an ecosystem. Anti-fragile system, it fits itself on the failure. So it's a question how organizations, traditionally bureaucracies, administration, people spending public money will accept this abstinence of a direct control to the expected benefit of the kind of a natural, if you say, wisdom and smartness and anti-fragility of the ecosystem.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to go to the second question, if I may, because we have only 20 minutes left for the second question and your questions. So you'll see a QR code popping up soon for Slido, and you can direct questions to the panel, and we'll pick them up as soon as they appear. You can, of course, also mention who you want to direct your question to, right? So the second question will be a bit more brief on that. Then, is how can deeper exchanges between member states be fostered? Who wants to start on that? Sasha, maybe.
Yes, thank you, Wim. Yeah, this brings me to another social innovation that we were very much to push to ALMA, that was born by a transnational learning network in 2014-2020, based on the German experience of our successor program, Integration durch Austausch, for transnational measures for disadvantaged young people, the so-called NEETs, not in employment, education and training. And it was then really a peer review, a mutual learning exchange network that helps us also to develop all the guidance that was then the basis for the transfer and the upscaling of this model in many other regions in member states, and also help us to really adapt our own program in a continuous exchange also on national level, because this is also our cooperation structure that have always network meetings every year, that have structures like steering groups where we can really test already ideas for minor change on the guidelines or on the simplified cost options models, in order that they have really the impact, the benefits. I will really highlight the fact that it was chosen as a flagship initiative because of the real impact that was then seen on the ground, and the change that it brought then to the participant, but also to the structure of themselves. I'm very much now from ministry, but we're working with non-profit organization because we rely on them, and we have always cherished this mutual learning and exchange in order to have real insights and feedback also from participants. It will be in the future even more important to empower participants and to bring more participants in participation, probably in the design. And on all my study visits, thanks to the Social Innovation Initiative, to see the implementation of Youth Guarantee in Finland, in Helsinki, or to see how human development and social inclusion works in Italy and in Torino, you can always see how much it can happen in a very structured way. Like you have the luck, it must be very fun in Portugal to dispose of such of innovation in this field. It's more that we have our little flowers that we maintain with some water. But of course, it wants to help this exchange, that others see on the ground that it can have this impact, and also change the mindset, because this is what we see also with this kind of measures and structure, that it helps for the regular system, for our agencies, that employment agency, public employment service and others, to work very closely with the non-profit organization or with social enterprise. And this is really much for the future, and a huge challenge in order to organize this a bit, to connect the different worlds that are working too much in silos. So we want along the different challenge to be quicker and smarter. And for that we need like also the national competence centers, or the help of national strategy to have synergies between the EU level goals and then the national strategy to adapt. So we have much to learn, and that's why all this exchange and forums are so important.
Systematic knowledge sharing is your key point. Felipe, what are your thoughts on this question? How can deeper exchanges between member states be fostered?
Okay. As I promised, I will be very short on this.
Please, yes.
But first, I'd like to highlight something, that it would never be possible in Portugal to have such a sound public policy program for social innovation for 1 decade now without the opportunity for the European funds. European funds were crucial because they allow us for a long-term strategy despite the internal political cycles. And that vision was crucial, besides, of course, the funding. And that was very, very important. That was key. That's, I think, why the European funds are pushing this strategy at an European level. But let me just say one thing, for the sake of being transparent. When it comes to social innovation, the European Commission doesn't always make the right questions. In the dozens and dozens of committees that I've been in with the managing authorities in Portugal, the European Commission has one main concern: execution. How much money was developed, was deployed to the ecosystem, to the economy of the overall budget? And we are always talking about percentages. When it comes to social innovation, that is not the right question. I've never heard, that's one of my frustrations, I've never heard a question like, is this projects becoming systemic? The transformation is becoming systemic. Are public policies embedding innovation? I've never heard this question, not even from the government. So I think it's one of my frustrations that I share here in a private room with so. But I think because some of the financing instruments that we have are based on measurable social impacts. Only on the end, we are matching funds with private investors that fully finance the projects, and then if the social impact is met, we reimburse the investor. So it's not adjusted to ask upfront, how much are you spending from the European funds? Wait to see if you have an impact. We are creating incentives for that. And to answer your question, I will be very brief, as I promised. I think the right answer to that, I would call your attention to the intervention of Jeroo, Billimoria, oh my God, I never know how to say, in the next intervention, because we have one of the biggest opportunities to make share these experiences between member states and between countries, not member states in Europe, but countries all over the world. It has just been created, this Government Council for Social Innovation. Jeroo is talking about that. And that is a platform that now has around 50 members, 50 countries that are sharing, represented but by high-level policy officers, even government members, that are sharing experiences and visions. And that is a good platform to share those experiences based on the experience that they already have.
We'll hear him later, but actually, Felipe, you can keep the microphone because the first question is for you. In fact, if you can share maybe also with us a concrete example of a social innovation project that, it's a different question now. The second, I'm going to take up the second question. If you can share an example of a social innovation project that became public policy.
Oh, Zapir again. Where is it?
It's the first one now.
Now it's the first one.
Do you have any examples in mind that you can share with us?
Well, okay, we have dozens of examples. Just one.
The best one.
One. A very, very new example. We funded a project in education that tried to gamify the education of maths, of Portuguese, of other disciplines in the schools. You understand gamify, it's transformation in the methodology. The professor becomes a game master. The students are like avatars. They have a book, they have a platform, they can move by their own considering their capabilities. Well, it was tested in very difficult schools around Portugal, and now it's becoming public policy at the national level. We are testing to broaden this methodology, change the way we teach things using the language that the young people really understand. What are the impacts? Better results, and the absenteeism dropped to zero because they were very committed to those kind of methodologies. Just one example.
Interesting. I'm going to go to the second question. Yes, the one that's on top now. How do we make sure that social innovation does not become an excuse for governments not to act on their obligation to provide social services? Very interesting one. Ruth, can I pass this on to you?
Okay, to be honest, I find this...
What?
Not that I don't know how to say this.
What are your thoughts?
Trying to put the word. Okay, so there is an obligation of the government to provide social services. Okay, then there are social innovations which, in the good world, social innovations are proposed to improve the way social services are delivered, basically, and so. Why should this be not acting on the obligation? I mean, it's an assumption that I don't understand. Well,
Yeah.
I think that's the point.
Okay.
Social innovation for me is about improving the way to deliver public services.
Also government actions then, of course.
Yes, exactly. That's when we talk about mainstreaming, is about making sure that these innovations are taken into public policy.
Exactly.
We're not trying to find that they are diverted to the private sector or a third sector.
Okay.
Or whatever.
The other one is also for you, I think, Ruud.
Yes.
For the Commission, what is your vision for the future of social innovation at the EU level in the next MFF?
Okay, so first of all, very shortly, I will say that I think that what we did in this MFF 2021-2027 with this Social Innovation Plus initiative is the good way to foster social innovation. Plus, we also, in the ESF, in the current ESF, there's also a reserve that, some member states have to invest at least a minimum on social innovation. But the current model that we have, so of the calls for proposals and the communities of practices, try to address the things that colleagues have mentioned. So collective learning, mutual learning, going to visit projects on the ground, calls for proposal that try to put together, what can be scaled on transferred, identifying the positives and the negatives, and therefore giving something for the ESF to mainstream, etc. For the future, all of this hopefully will remain. The only thing that will not remain is a reserved amount to be spent in social innovation in the mainstream funds, but the way we organize, we would like to have it as well. And a plus is that the financing in the next MFF is not linked to costs, but is linked to results. So it's actually, it will go, I would address the criticism that Mr. Almeida just made.
Okay. This is constantly changing. I'll just take the first one, the most popular one. Should social innovation become a service on demand for public authorities? Who wants to go into that one? Kuba?
One. If I understand what should social... I believe that the question, because in this ecosystem...
Maybe is the person who asked the question in the room, and do you want to elaborate? Okay, microphone here. Cyprian. It should work.
It's technical innovation, that's why. So what I've heard from Felipe as well. Good morning, and
good morning
to everyone. What I've heard from you was that you almost like use as public authorities, social innovators, to fix things that the state cannot fix. So if we, and I am not like the esteemed panel working for a think tank or for the state, but as a social innovator, I would very much like sometimes to be used by the state as a service provider in innovation. So the state can outsource the fact that it is not capable always to deliver on what it should, like Robin said earlier. So if the answer is yes, what do we need to change in the way we finance social innovation, and what are the dangers? Because innovation in itself is, like I was saying last year, it's like white tigers, right? Remember? If it's something that is rare, can we really mainstream it? It's like technical innovation. If we just pour money into it, will we become more competitive and Chinese? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay. I'm a big, I think there is no kind of a singular approach. One is this kind of evolutionary, hundreds flowers, whatever, kind of almost randomized. But I'm a big proponent, actually, of the on-demand innovation. So very often, I'm in this business for many years, so sometimes you have a real problem, but the solution is weak. You have someone who believes that, application is of everything, but there is no real problem on the other side. Or someone has a good idea, but in terms of the skills to actually, and the risk-taking, and the entrepreneurial spirit, basically to test it, is a failure. To mix all three is a kind of a complicated, unique situation. I think administration should really use that thing, but mentally, and it's very cultural. Even the talking, and that's a moment to say, the social innovation are very much culturally embedded. Even the question, who is responsible for what? Education, security, health services, end of life, whatever. It's different in Anglo-Saxon countries, in the Scandinavian countries, in the continental Europe, in the post-Soviet countries, in the Spain, etc., etc. It has to be, and that's my voice for this kind of so-called shared management. I think there is a level of idiosyncrasies, something which is local, culturally embedded. But the question is, as you said, since innovation is, I'm the first one, no, not ever, but the kind of a trick for convergence is actually to make it as generic as possible to be really replicated. And I think, and that's my point, that if you want to exchange that thing, a mosaic, not the kind of a centralized management of a social innovation, we should keep this kind of a mosaic approach, but increase this capacity to collaborate, by which I mean first, exactly on-demand innovation, but then government, and for many governments, actually admitting that we don't know everything, they think is a proof of weakness. Actually, is a proof of being strong. To say, okay, ask citizens, and that we need that courage from the public sector to say, sometimes we need you guys to develop those things, and that will be perfect thing. So that will also immediately, as I said, the social innovation mainstream is based on a pull, not just push. And I think those kind of pull thing is important. Second, I think we have, although we are very much looking for people who self-nominate themselves as an innovator, I will be very happy. I'm too old for that. But that bit in this kind of a test pilot crew who say, okay, whatever. In the year, we are going to test 3 or 4 social innovation in the sense, it's very interesting to see how you deal with the heat waves in Portugal, because in Poland, we're just discovering that we have a big problem with that. And I would fast track that process to be able to take whatever from Spain, Italy, Germany, whatever, or in the case of the recently, what is the opposite of heat? Is basically it's freezing. Okay, so you have like, in UK, you have I think 10 or 10,000 kind of a heating points, including Royal Shakespeare Company, so people can come and sit and say, it's nothing humiliating to go and spend some time in the thing. But anyway, this European convergence, we should have, I don't know, as a separate agency or the group, being able actually and focus only on this kind of a cloning or the localizing services. And not just, based on whoever is raising a hand, but basically being strategic. Europe right now invented kind of a common standard of ammunition and many other things. I think in the social innovation, we should have this kind of a vocabulary for the exchange of services. I also will recommend very much, we cannot make another Airbus project, but to produce a social innovation almost in a way of, I don't know, kind of a hackathon, conclave type of a thing, to take the pool of talent from a few countries and say, okay, you have 1 month, you are not going to leave and you don't have any pizza until you invent a kind of a rapid prototyping model. So basically, this learning curve should be much faster. It should be designed as a generic and designed from the very beginning as a thing to last and to stick. It's very different from people who basically 90% of a social innovation are people who are, in our case, because we work mainly with people who are dependent. Family, which has the responsibility for people with disabilities, and they want to invent something. They don't have any kind of a gene of promotion. Even if they invent something, they don't go in, let's go for the European market. It doesn't work that way.
Kuba,
so
if I can stop you there, there's one more question for you.
One is Ukraine, because in this exchange, because we have, in Poland, we have a unique opportunity to see this society. It might be a lot of discussion with the Ukrainians and when in NATO or EU. Tell you, as a sociologist, as someone who have, this is the most innovative society right now under the stress. If we really believe social innovation is not the outcome of popularity, opportunism because of money or being fashionable in EU, real social innovation is the outcome of necessity. And believe me, Ukrainians are such an open book of incredible amount of the social innovation that should be incorporated to this, our ecosystem as fast as possible as teachers, not as someone who will be taught by us.
On that, I'll have to close the panel discussion because otherwise we won't have time for a coffee break. And we do not want that. So thank you very much, Kuba, Ruth, Felipe, Sasha, and Patricia for joining in this panel conversation. We take We take a short break to stretch our legs and get energized for the second part of the forum today. We meet again at 12:20, 25, and lunch will follow at 1 o'clock. Have a nice break. Welcome back, and we will now move to the presentation that Felipe is looking forward to, but not only him, of course. About scaling social innovation with governments, and it's my pleasure to invite Jeroo Billimoria of the One Family Foundation. And the One Family Foundation empowers communities, social entrepreneurs and governments to co-create lasting solutions that tackle poverty, inequality and exclusion. And let me also add that Jeroo has won all the international awards possible for her projects on social innovation. So please, Jeroo, take the floor. There's a microphone right here. This one works.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I hope you all had a nice coffee break and are a bit rejuvenated for this 10 minutes of my intervention. So, my first question, I'm going to start with some questions. How many, just so I get a pulse of the audience, how many of you are from competence centers? All the competence centers people? Wow, quite a few. Okay. How many from governments who are sort of linked to competence centers? Super. And social innovators or entrepreneurs? Okay, super. And the rest, academics, I assume? A few? Super. And then foundations, any other foundations? 2, fantastic. So we have a diverse group, and I think the largest group over here is from governments and competence centers. So that's good. I'll focus the first part on what Felipe was talking about. And I have to say, he's actually the chair of the Government Council for Social Innovation. But let me just quickly start with scaling social innovations. And why I was asked to actually speak today is mainly to look at how and why we need to scale. So this is more for the innovators. Honestly, I have scaled multiple organizations. And the one thing I learned is if we want to do real scale, we need to partner with government. Because that's what will give us the infrastructure, the reach, the legitimacy, and the long-term sustainability. And working in more than 100+ countries across around 4 or 5 different projects which I have started, I think that's the most important thing. And this is for the innovators, and I'll talk about that. The next is how are we going to do it? And I think over here, the competence centers come into place. So Felipe, Zara from Germany and myself were at a meeting, and we said, why is it that governments don't really talk to as much? And I just don't mean Europe, okay? I mean across the world. And the competence centers, why can't they talk to each other much more? And let's create something. It was just one coffee conversation, and today, as he mentioned, the Government Council for Social Innovation, which launched in Luxembourg, and I know Paul from Luxembourg's here, in April, now has 51 countries and another 6 in the pipeline. So we'll be soon reaching probably 70 or 80 countries. What is the Government Council for Social Innovation? It's basically based on the Luxembourg Declaration, which the 51 countries signed, which is to raise awareness about social innovation. Most countries don't really have the legal and structural frameworks. So we talk a lot, but they don't really have that. So how can we create the legal, structural, and institutional frameworks? And the Government Council is now working with global law firms to do a measurement of all of that and see what can happen. To make sure there are innovative sources of funding. My hobby horse, you talked about taxation. I love it. And we have many alternate forms of taxation, starting from my favorite, space tax, but I won't get into that. Then we are looking at how can we measure, because everyone talks about social innovation, but there is a skepticism about it. The reason is we don't have enough impact measurement, and that's the reason we are looking at how we can measure the impact. How can we look at the scale of the sector? When we had actually done it for the initial meeting of the Government Council of Social Innovation, we had realized that almost 3 times the size of Germany's economy, which is the third largest economy in the world, is in the social innovation space. But we don't have the exact numbers. So that's what we need to do. So this is a shout out to all the academics. Work with us to make sure that happens. In One Family Foundation, we have a term called voluntold. So we love to voluntold people. So this is voluntolding the academics. Let's create the framework for what really is the scope and the size for social innovation. The next thing that we do is a lot of peer exchanges, which you all have done a lot of, and to ensure that it is included. Currently, as I said, we are in 51 countries, and these are all the main objectives that we are now doing. One of the things that we would like to do, and I was asked to give a shout out, is currently we have Slovakia, Portugal, and Luxembourg, who are part of the Government Council. We would invite, so there's Marcella. Marcella, can you raise your hand? Luxembourg, Paul, I can't see you, sorry. There is Paul, you can speak to him. Raise your hand, and of course, you know the rock star chair of ours, Felipe, who was on stage earlier. So please ask them why they joined it and why the 51 countries are there. Many, many countries are looking at Europe to actually compete. So there, you know, Europe is sort of leading in the area of social innovation because it's the only place where, thanks to European social funds, thanks to the Commission, there is some sort of social innovation network. So now what we want to do is work with the countries in Europe, but work across the whole world to do these 5 things. Create a global policy resolution or declaration around social innovation for creating a people and planet-centered economy. So that would be the first objective, and the Luxembourg Declaration is the start of it. Make sure, what you all are already doing a bit through the competence centers, but more at a global level, make sure that there is a lot of peer-to-peer sharing by creating all the necessary case studies, etc. Third, and most important, is money is shrinking. With the exception of the Commission, no other government has money. I'm being very, very honest over here. We go to Africa, they've signed all the resolutions, and I said, okay, what's happening on implementation? Or Latin America? We don't have funding. So we need to create new sources. And there are also countries in Europe who've told us that. I'm not naming it. So how do we create alternate source of financing? And what we have been thinking about is creating different structures and writing down what countries is doing. So some countries, like Bhutan, has a $200 levy for everybody who enters the country. India has a 2% CSR. France, you already talked about the policy which was there. There are many, many policies, and then there are alternate forms of levies which can put. Like I mentioned, space levy. The outer space in the world is not used by anybody. It's our property. It should be the social innovation space's property. If we look at all of this, we can actually exceed the 3 trillion deficit that is currently there for the social sector. So that's what the Government Council is trying to do. It's a 3 trillion deficit to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. That's what we are trying to do. And I saw someone frown, that's why I had to say that. So that's the deficit we can reach. And last and not the least, build the ecosystem leveraging technology and AI. So what we are doing, and you can speak to my colleagues, Bairbre, who's here, and Bram, who's there. We are creating a knowledge hub for all the innovations that are there, which can be copied and scaled. So any country who wants to do it, and more importantly, with the help of Felipe and our other council members, we have created an evaluation of where you are on your social innovation journey. And we can help you reach the end of that journey, not by doing it ourselves, but by linking you to rockstar countries who have achieved a lot in that journey. So I think this is the Social Innovation Hub. This is basically what we are doing through the Government Council on Social Innovation. And I would invite every competence center over here to join, to speak to us, and to do more. I have 2 minutes, and the academics have to help in all the measurements and the taxation and levies. Moving to the next part of this presentation, and this is for the social innovators in the room. So I'm going to keep this brief because there are fewer social innovators in the room, but we have a publication for you on how you can scale with governments and what you need to do to make sure that you can scale your social innovation with government. The most important thing, and I have started something called Catalyst, which has more than 6,000 social innovators worldwide from 150 plus countries. One of the things we realize, why does social innovation not happen, is because we don't think of the we. We think of how will I scale my innovation. We don't think about what is the problem we want to solve. So the most important thing, and I think the next speaker is going to be talking about it, so I'm not going to talk more on this, that's also why I cut, is we are going to see how can we use the theoretical approach of collaborative systems change, which are the 5 C's of convene, connect, co-create, celebrate, and calibrate, which is measure, to actually scale your social innovation. So I think this is one of the things which we can do. And with this is a shout out to all the social innovators. If you want to scale, you're welcome to come to us. However you want to do it, either through local pathways at the local level with your local government, at the national level, or all of you want to do EU-wide scaling, which is also possible, or at the global level, you said, this innovation, wow, this can only work. So when I started child helplines, I started it in India. But this was something the world needed. And today there are child helplines in more than 140 countries, helping 10 million children every year. Actually, we've helped more than 150 million children so far. So I think that's the difference which is there. And that scaling is only possible because you partner with governments, make governments a key part of it, and you look at it. And there are multiple models of collaboration, but I think the important thing over here is that if you work together, you choose your pathway, you can collaborate. And then you join the competence center, which will give you the money to scale. So we have a full circle over here for all of us to make it happen. So let's make sure we have a lot of scalable innovations and a strong social innovation ecosystem. That's what we need, and that's what we will have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeroo, for your, and here's your phone. Thank you for your very enthusiastic presentation and very useful presentation indeed. And it's now my pleasure to introduce the second keynote of the day indeed. And this keynote will provide us with governance officials' perspectives on the challenges of scaling social innovation initiatives and why it sometimes doesn't work. I heard that we can expect valuable insights into practical realities of implementing and expanding successful projects and the lessons learned along the way. We are honored to welcome Bairbre Nic Aongusa, Assistant Secretary General at the Department of Rural and Community Development and the Gaeltacht in Ireland. Gaeltacht, I've learned, by the way, is the regions in Ireland where Irish is the main language, and happy to give you the floor, Bairbre.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Wim. I'm very pleased to be here today, and I'd like to thank the organisers for the invitation to give you the keynote, a second keynote this morning. My name is Bairbre Nic Aongusa, and I'm a senior civil servant working for the Government of Ireland. I have over 30 years' experience of working in different ministries. And today I want to share with you a very personal reflection on the challenges as I experienced them over my career of progressing social innovations within what was a highly centralised and bureaucratic system. I'm aware that all countries and cultures are different, but I think that many of you will relate to some of the challenges that I speak about. But before I start, just a few words about my own country, Ireland. As you know, Ireland is a very small island on the western fringes of Europe. In 2022, our population was 5.5 million. Our capital city is Dublin on the east coast, and indeed most of our population lives on the east coast. Our story is an economic story of boom and bust. We were a very poor nation when we joined the EU. We had a very successful economy in the 1990s and early 2000s, and then the financial crash came, and we were one of the countries that needed to be bailed out by the EU. We started recovering, and then we faced the next big challenge, which was Brexit and the departure of our nearest neighbour and biggest trading partner from the EU. But as a result, we are now the largest English-speaking EU member, though I would say we and that is an advantage. We have many US multinationals who have their European headquarters in our country. But I would say we also have our own language, Gaeilge, and I am one of the small minority who still speak Irish in everyday life. Agus sin cúpla focail as Gaeilge le tuaim a thuirtíomh cén sais teanga í. So as you can see, it's very different, a Celtic language. That's not the subject of today, but I could elaborate over that some other time. Our economy is booming again, but like many other Western countries, we are facing crises in housing and in infrastructure, and indeed the challenge of migration. But my story actually begins in the early 1990s when I first joined the civil service as a junior official. The building on the bottom left there is the Department of Social Protection, or Social Welfare as it was then, where I started my career. And after 2 years there, I was moved to the Department or Ministry of Finance, the building on the bottom right. And it was there that I encountered the culture of the civil service, which it seemed to me had changed very little since my own father had been a civil servant in the 1950s. The culture was very much command and control, a very conservative culture with a strict hierarchy and a top-down approach. There was a huge reliance on precedent, what we did before, and why on earth should we change what has worked in the past. Another aspect of the culture was the almost complete absence of women, which was challenging as a young official. So you're probably wondering then, what was the big ugly building at the top there, at the top of the slide? That was where I was sent after 2 years of training in the Ministry of Finance. It was the Department of Health. And it was there that I spent the next 20 years of my career. And this slide shows pictures of 19th century psychiatric institutions, which were still in use in Ireland in the 1990s and early 2000s. And in my first role as a senior manager with the Department of Health, I was assigned to the mental health unit, which should really have retained its old name of the Psychiatric Hospitals Unit, because all of the energy and all of the funding and all of the resources went into maintaining these institutions. And that was in spite of a growing movement of service users and patient advocates and families and carers saying that these institutions should no longer be used, that people needed to live independent lives in the community. We also had a multitude of government reports recommending that the institutions be closed down. But it was then that I learned how difficult it is to change a system, even when everybody agrees that it needs to change. There is a huge literature, as many of you know, on resistance to change. But how I experienced it was that the biggest problem in seeking to change the system was the power imbalance. Mental health service users and disability advocates were no match for the bureaucracy and its reluctance to take risks. The power of the system to maintain the status quo is significant, and when there's no compelling reason to change, the system will stay the same. And as many of you who may be working or know of NGOs, as you know, the moral argument for changing the system is rarely sufficient. So the top-down culture of the civil service, the innate conservatism was a problem. But for those of you who might be seeking change, the last 3 bullets are also significant. There was poor communication to those in power of the benefits or the necessity for change. The dialogue was often happening too late in the game when funding was being allocated. And there was a mutual failure to understand the needs and the perspectives of the other side. And that's a theme I'll come back to later. So how did I, in my role as a manager in the Department of Health, overcome these obstacles and try and get little changes? An opportunity presented to me when a major Irish-American philanthropy fund decided it wanted to do something about the institutions in Ireland. And I worked with an intermediary organisation, which subsequently became Jeroo, to design a small 2-year programme which would support individuals to move out of institutions. Once we had the agreement, the philanthropic funding would only invest the funding if it was matched by government. So I had to persuade my minister to allocate a very small amount of money, €2 million, out of a budget of 350 million to this project. I argued with the minister that it was a very small amount of money and it wouldn't make a huge difference if it failed. However, the reputational risk of refusing an offer from a major Irish-American philanthropist was significant. Once the minister was on board, we started to work to build a coalition of the willing. That is, people who worked in the system who wanted to change. We purposely did not engage with anyone who was resistant to change. And our theory was that if this first pilot was successful, then others would come on board. And using the same model, I later partnered with another Irish philanthropic organisation to develop a youth mental health service, again based on the needs and wishes of young people, because the service as we had was not at all suitable for young people. And then finally, in 2014, I moved to the Department of Housing and once again encountered almost a replica of the system I had left, a massive system which was resistant to change, and yet the problem of long-term chronic homelessness was not being tackled. So I worked again with Jeroo and philanthropic funding to establish a Housing First project in Ireland in 2016. Again, on a very, very small scale. As I recall, it was €1 million I managed to get from the philanthropists, which was matched by €1 million from the housing budget. But despite these successes on a small scale, as far as I was concerned, the problems remained. There was no sign to me of the system changing. The problem was, as all of you will be familiar with from our earlier discussions, these were all isolated projects on the margins of very big systems. And progress was often dependent on individual leaders with the goodwill to overcome the barriers that the system put up. And the initiatives often stalled or failed completely when these individuals moved on. And from my vantage point, there seemed to be no immediate prospect of systemic change or indeed mainstreaming. So for me, as I advanced to a more senior level in government, the question remained, how do we make social innovation integral to policy processes and service delivery? And that's the very question that I know we have all been discussing this morning in the panel discussion. So once again, I'm going to share with you what worked for me, and it was about culture. In my view, the culture of an organisation and the culture of an environment is a crucial ingredient to make social innovation an integral part of policy. They say you should never waste a good crisis. Every crisis is an opportunity. And for me personally, 2017 was a crisis. There was a change of government and a new ministry was created, the Minister for Rural and Community Development. And it was necessary to establish a new government department to support this minister. So I and a colleague found myself being tasked with establishing a new government department, a new ministry from ground zero. This was an enormous challenge, the biggest challenge of my career, but it was also an opportunity for us to consciously create a new culture. We had inherited portfolios from other government departments which had not been given priority until then, and now we were suddenly required to make progress and to make progress fast. In my case, on the community development side, relationships with stakeholders were extremely poor. The community and voluntary sector in Ireland had been cut very severely during the financial crisis and had not recovered. And the relationships were, if anything, were certainly antagonistic and oftentimes hostile. Also, there was no settled policy framework for the community and voluntary sector, in spite of the fact that it is a very large part of our health and social services infrastructure. So the first thing I needed to do was to find out what the stakeholders thought and where they were coming from. So we started a consultation process, and this is what we heard. The sector felt that they were being ignored. Policy was being drafted and decisions were being taken without any engagement with them, without any involvement. And despite what officials had assumed, their concerns were not exclusively about funding. They wanted to be treated with respect, to be given a hearing. They felt that their knowledge and their contribution to Irish society was not valued by government officials or indeed by the politicians. So we worked together with them to develop a blueprint, to develop a set of values and principles that could underpin the relationships necessary going forward. It was almost like a peace treaty with the sector, between the state and the sector after the falling out during the financial crisis. And these values and principles would be signed up to by all government departments and local, regional governments and state agencies, and they would inform all the collaboration and partnership working that was necessary in the context of consultation, policy and programme design, implementation and monitoring. And these are the values that we developed and were agreed by the Irish government. They're called Values and Principles for Collaboration and Partnership Working with the Community and Voluntary Sector. The values are social inclusion, social justice, empowering communities, sustainable development, active participation, and human rights, equality, and anti-discrimination. Now, which European government could refuse to sign up to those values? And the principles were respect, subsidiarity, harmonisation, value for money, implementation, and collaboration. And once again, it was difficult for any official, even in the Ministry of Finance, to argue against signing up to those principles. And yet, by signing up to those values and principles, we built an enormous amount of trust and respect with the very sector that had been at war with government for the previous 10 years. And informed by those values and principles, we moved from collaboration to the ultimate goal of co-creation of policy with our stakeholders. Over the next 6 years, we worked with our stakeholders to develop a comprehensive policy framework for the community and voluntary sector in Ireland, starting with the one at the top called Sustainable, Inclusive and Empowered Communities, and it did exactly what it says in the title. And then it was followed by a suite of other policies, a national social enterprise policy, a national volunteering strategy, and more recently, a national philanthropy policy. And each one of these policy formulation processes followed the same methodology. We engaged with our stakeholders and set up what are known as cross-sectoral groups. And this is where all of the stakeholders, including government ministries and state agencies, sat around the same table as equal partners in developing the strategy, deciding what the actions were, deciding what the priorities were. It takes time. It was a very lengthy process, but very much well worth it, because when the policies were published, they had the full support of all of those affected by them. And the final step, of course, was endorsement by our Taoiseach's office, and the Taoiseach is the Prime Minister, and that meant that central government was behind these policies. They were not just policies for our department, but whole of government policies. We were convinced that we knew that our relationship with the sector was much improved, but the proof was forthcoming in 2022 when we conducted a customer service strategy. A customer service survey. And as you can see from the slide there, a large majority of community organisations, implementing partners and other stakeholders felt that they were very satisfied or usually satisfied with the work of our department. And the quote below the table there I find that personnel are keen to provide solutions rather than being obstructive or awkward. The personnel we engage with want to help us to succeed. That quotation, I think, is significant because it would not have been said by an NGO or a community partner a few years previously about any government official. I just want to say a few words about the importance of ministers. Any change in the culture or the way of engagement with stakeholders, the role of ministers is absolutely vital. And we were very fortunate to have a number of ministers who were extremely supportive of the approach that we were taking. We already have a strong community culture in Ireland with an ethos of volunteering and building communities. But we were particularly fortunate in that we had a minister who had come from the NGO sector and who instinctively understood the benefits of collaborating with government instead of opposing government or being in conflict. And so at all times, he stressed the need for dialogue, for consultation, collaboration, and co-creation, and he championed the shared values. And as a result, the sector trusted him. And more significantly, because he was the minister, the system obeyed him. So we are continuing in our department to work collaboratively with all of our stakeholders. And I'm now able to take a chance to outline to you what we're doing in Ireland now with our ESF Plus funding, the social innovation strand. Our model has been developed taking account of the views of our stakeholders and the international evidence, notably the work of the OECD that was referred to earlier. Our social innovation fund is called New Solutions, and it has 3 strands: a social innovation hub with a remit to develop the social innovation ecosystem, and a one-stop shop for capacity building and supports. The second strand is scaling up grants for those social innovations that have proven and are ready to scale. And the final strand will be pilot grants for new social innovation pilot projects. We're very excited about this multi-strand approach, which mirrors the OECD's approach of starting, scaling, and sustaining. And I have some colleagues with me here from Ireland, and we would be very happy to speak to you in more detail about that over the coffee or the lunch break. One aspect I want to emphasize, however, about this, and it is the importance of alignment with policy across government. We are determined that only projects that align with government policy will be funded under our New Solutions Fund. And that is because once they align with government policy, they have a better prospect of future funding and eventual mainstreaming. We are establishing an advisory group with officials from other government ministries who are already familiar with our methodology of cross-sectoral group and collaborative working. And so at this point, I would give the same advice to social innovators that you've already heard from people on the panel. If you want your social innovation to succeed, it is good to make sure that it's aligned with government policy. So some concluding thoughts. Why is it so difficult to get projects to scale? Many of you will be familiar with the phrase culture eats strategy for breakfast, which has been attributed to Peter Drucker. It's really well known because it's so true. I'm personally convinced that from the civil service perspective, culture dictates everything. And my experience in our current department is that embedding a collaborative culture in the organization opened doors and established trust, which enabled significant change to happen. So for those of you who are outside government and seeking to engage, it's important to understand the culture of the government ministry or indeed the EU Commission that you're trying to engage with. And of course, not all departments are like the Department of Rural and Community Development and the Gaeltacht. It won't come as a surprise to you to hear that the typical culture in a government ministry, innovation does not come naturally. And the cartoon here on the slide may be a little bit extreme. These are 2 prisoners in a cell, and one says to the other, "I was a government bureaucrat and I showed initiative." We're not all like that, I can assure you. So innovation does not come naturally. However, government officials are struggling with really difficult social problems. The social challenges we've heard about already today: migration, homelessness, disability, climate justice. And what was done before is no longer serving us and no longer helping us to solve these problems. So the old reliance on precedent is not helpful to us. Government officials are really struggling to find solutions to major policy challenges. That's why we called our Social Innovation Fund New Solutions, because the old ways of doing things no longer work. But if social innovation can come up with new solutions to help us tackle these problems, then they have a good chance of being funded, being scaled, and eventually mainstreaming. And my experience is exactly that. The small pilot projects that I mentioned to you earlier, that I had despaired of ever changing anything, have actually, in the 20 years since, have become mainstreamed. The psychiatric units, psychiatric institutions in Ireland have closed down. People with disabilities are now living independently in the community, and Housing First is a key component of the Irish government's approach to chronic homelessness. We also now have a jigsaw youth mental health service in every county in Ireland, funded by central government under our health service executive. Each of these social innovations succeeded in scaling for two reasons. Firstly, because they were really good ideas, and the pilot projects provided proof of concept to the officials. But secondly, and crucially, they provided a solution to a current policy challenge. So what can social innovation do for us? That's the question that the officials and the bureaucrats are asking. So if you can come to them with a solution to their problems, then you have a very good chance of being funded, of scaling, and your solution becoming part of mainstream policy. So my final thought is this: we need to build a collaborative culture, and to do so we need to work hard on relationships. And most importantly, we need to walk in the other's shoes. For those of us in government, it means us being open to taking risks, being open to go with a good idea, even if we don't have all the KPIs and the impact measurement and the evidence and so on. If in your gut you think it's a good idea, why not go with it, especially if you have the authority and the control of a little bit of funding, as I did when I was a middle-ranking manager in the mental health unit. For those of you outside government, it's about understanding what we need in government and starting to talk to us before you develop your new solution. Because once again, innovations that address the key policy concerns are more likely to be funded and to be scaled successfully. And finally, we all need to accept that it won't always work and be ready for failure. But let's keep asking, why doesn't it work, and trying to fix it. And last of all, I'm suggesting that we don't forget about why we are all doing this, the ultimate beneficiaries of our social innovations. And to finish, I just have a few photos of projects that have been funded by us in Ireland. These are projects that address welcoming our new communities, our new migrant communities, employment skills for those most distant from the labour market, and integration through sport. Goramila Mahagav. Thank you very much.
Oops. Thank you, Bairbre, for this most inspiring keynote, and I'm sure that also your perspectives and your thoughts and practical tips on the challenges of scaling social innovation will resonate throughout the forum and the workshops this afternoon. Each afternoon workshop has its assigned room and location. So please take a moment, also you can see them on your badge, to check where your session will take place. I would like to remind you that the workshop on social innovation is fully booked. But very important is, because you won't find it anywhere else, the rooms have different names. And all the Terra rooms, Terra 1, 2, and 3, are on the La Terre, on the ground floor. So you go down 1 floor for the Terra rooms. The Risio rooms, 1, 2 plus 3, and 5, are on the 3rd floor. 1 floor up. You rise for Risio, okay? I want to repeat that dinner will be served at 6 o'clock here in the hotel, giving you a chance to continue networking on a more informal or in a more informal setting rather. Enjoy the workshops. I look forward to seeing you again for the plenary session tomorrow here.